Empire vs. Aldmeri Dominion. Aldmeri Dominion vs. Empire. The Great War of Tamriel. A conflict looming since the Oblivion Crisis, and a prelude of the Skyrim Civil War. And the Aldmeri Dominion possibly even being the main villain of the Elder Scrolls 6. But what of the First Great War, as it's called by the peoples of Skyrim? Well, at the core of every story is a prelude. As stated before, this conflict has been looming since the Oblivion Crisis, in which the servants of Mehrunes Dagon engulfed the continent. Not long after, Elsewhere experiences unrest and the governing body of the region gets assassinated. Around 100 years later, the moons disappear, and the Aldmeri Dominion swoop in to take credit for returning Mazer and Secunda. However, I feel this is more Bethesda's fantasy element in their storytelling. In real life, the equivalent would be the Boer War in Africa. A war symbolizing imperialism in Africa, but the result of this war, like the Boer War, ended imperialism for both sides. Paired with the sheer fact Elsewhere wouldn't be united, I feel both would be too war-torn, even with all political factions acting indirectly. As for the Khajiit religion itself, this would also be contested as in real life, religions aren't united and even harbor bitter rivalries, as well as hypocrisy. Many religious leaders may ignore it, even if the Thalmor brought back the moons. Either way, imperial influence would cease, just like the Boer War. As for Valenwood, it is a similar story. The Aldmeri Dominion at this point does not want a direct war yet, and considering they have longer lifespans, would probably opt to divide and conquer, just like the games say. The Thalmor would opt for Valenwood to succeed voluntarily, and say that both Elsewhere and the Aldmeri Dominion themselves would back them. The Empire, on the other hand, not seeing Valenwood as a good enough reason to go to war, and seeing the fellow Elven sympathizers, would recede. For the Empire, High Rock, Skyrim, and Hammerfell are well intact. Blackmarsh had conceded not seeing a reason to stick around. Plus, the Empire can't penetrate the region. Though I don't think it would be at the time of the Oblivion Crisis, it would likely be decades later. The reason being, there's still likely Empire sympathizers in the region, and it would take time for them to want to go their own way. As for the Dunmer of Morrowind, between the war and the Red Year, happening 5 years after the Oblivion Crisis, they'd recover centuries later. They may be more or less out of commission for 100 years, but would recover in time for the Great War. However, they would have trouble with the Argonians in that time, but it wouldn't be as devastating. The Thalmor are still fierce warriors and have more access to magic. It would be mostly skirmishes and small-scale raids, which would bring us to the Great War. Unlike the Aldmeri Dominion giving the Empire an ultimatum, the Thalmor would likely ensue a surprise attack. Although Bethesda's influence for this war is World War I, it's still primarily also based on ancient and medieval warfare. Although the Thalmor seem equivalent to a political party, the Aldmeri Dominion themselves seem primarily based on ancient Greece. The Imperials are based on the Romans. If you've watched my other video, the Romans fought in an enhanced phalanx formation. They would send light infantry to make their opponents aggressive, then as they attacked, the cavalry would guard their flanks. As for the Thalmor, it's a little bit of a different story, as it requires a little bit more speculation. Although the Greeks made a phalanx, the Aldmeri Dominion relies heavily on magic. This can be synthesized in this scenario as a type of technology. The Empire has it as well, but not as utilized. Which is why the Thalmor phalanx formation would be thinner. The Thalmor also don't have as many troops. Despite the Empire being weakened, they still have the numerical advantage. Therefore, the surprise attack would likely be on the largest fortress at the southwestern Cyrodiilic border. The Greeks also used smoke to leverage cities and fortresses into submission. This can be enhanced through magic/technology. I find unlikely in this scenario they would use catapults as they want to move quickly. The fortresses with a relatively small garrison would fall and surrender. Then, the High Elves would likely to cement their foothold with the sacking of Kvatch. Not only to demoralize the Empire by destroying the image of the hero Kvatch, but also to cut off Anvil from the rest of Cyrodiil. In the meantime, Thalmor would likely take Anvil with its fleet. The Romans, whose navy was minimal and relies heavily on the Egyptians and the Greeks, would succumb to a larger and superior navy. Though if you want to say the Imperials have a navy, that's fair enough. However, it may largely be the East Empire Company. Either way, Anvil still gets sacked. Some of the garrison even headed inland to help Kvatch. Kvatch would likely be captured before the Imperial city makes its way there. The first battlefield confrontation would happen outside of Skingrad, probably around Shard Drak. This would prove futile, as the Empire would likely be routed. The Thalmor, when the tactics of the Empire, would be able to sidestep them. Other than routing them, their superior magic would wear them down, winning the battle for the Thalmor. Skingrad would then come under siege. The Imperials would start becoming familiar with the Thalmor, and at this point would prepare to be smoked out, but the High Elves would anticipate their anticipation and poison any food and water supply of the city. Not long after that, a weakened Skingrad would fall, be pillaged by the Thalmor. The Aldmeri's main goal is to of course take the Imperial city. Once that falls, even if the Emperor himself lives, it is unlikely he would be able to get any sort of foothold in the province. As for Coral, in the north, it would take a defensive stance, knowing the Empire is likely not going to be able to send reinforcements. The Count will be able to do this as they have control over their own garrison. The Count is the equivalent to a governor and have their own jurisdiction. But the Thalmor want the Imperial city, and not Coral, so they push on. In the meantime, reinforcements are pulled from southern Cyrodiil and Shadenhall. The Imperials at this point want to meet the High Elves with their perceived strengths and not letting them surround the capital completely. Gaining strength in the forests of the West Field, the Imperials marched to meet the Thalmor hosts, and after a prolonged battle, both sides would ultimately lose. Both the Thalmor and Imperials would sustain heavy losses. In these losses, both sides would retreat. The Thalmor would regroup in Skingrad, and the Imperials in the Imperial City. In the aftermath, in which the bodies are barely cold, Black Marsh would strike. Then, being independent and seemingly aggressive, look to take southern Cyrodiil, which has been left with minimum security. The Argonians may even enter Cyrodiil pretending to be allies. The Argonians in Leyawiin and Breville would likely help them as they have a history of being oppressed and feel the Empire is going to ultimately lose to the Thalmor. And the Argonians will succeed in taking southern Cyrodiil. Not only that, but the Thalmor, who already had a numerical disadvantage, would start forcing Valenwood into war as slave soldiers. In the meantime, the Emperor would send for reinforcements to the garrisons of Skyrim and High Rock. Hammerfell would likely be on the fence, but would be thinking about succession when the Aldmeri Dominion would launch a naval attack in Hammerfell. The Thalmor, underestimating the Redguard navy, attacks, virtually starting a war on two fronts. Redguards return in kind. This can be seen to happen similarly in World War I. The Germans start a war on two fronts and attack Belgium, getting a neutral country involved to attack France, while also invading Russia. The Redguards would launch an offensive against the Thalmor navy, making some supplies scarcer as well as less mages. As for the actual Redguard navy, the ancient Egyptian tactics were similar to that of the Greeks. The Redguards would have more as they can produce makeshift vessels faster. They would also have a defensive edge in bulwarks. The Thalmor with mostly slave soldiers would attack the Imperial city. They would take heavy losses through Imperial catapults and ballistae. Realizing they can't beat the Imperial city walls, they begin surrounding it to get them to submit. Coral likely bends the knee, while the entire west of Cyrodiil burns. They keep doing this all over Cyrodiil. The Aldmeri army likely engages some with the Argonians over the Niben. Most refugees flock to Bruma. Shadenhall actually starts doing pretty well against the Thalmor. Nestled close to the Valus Mountains, the city is able to get supplies, while also taking advantage of the rougher terrain and engage in guerrilla warfare. Bruma is also in a similar position, as the Thalmor struggle to get an advantage in the foreign mountain terrain. Plus, the refugees are reinforcing as militia. The rest of Cyrodiil is put to the sword, or even carried off as slaves for labor or even experiments. The Imperial city starts falling into despair. With minimal supplies and fear of attack every day, there would also likely be assassination attempts on the Emperor. Much of the city is eating rats or mud crabs, and the sewers become a battleground. However, the city still holds. High Rock sends reinforcements, also full of battle mages, while Skyrim sends more hardy Nords to Bruma. While Hammerfell engages in naval battles, the northern hosts start to send south, destroying smaller, scattered Thalmor hosts. The remaining are forced to retreat from their pillaging. In the meantime, seeing a shift in the tide, Morrowind attacks Black Marsh. The Dunmer attack the outskirts, allying themselves with the Empire. In real life, the bad blood between Morrowind and the Empire wouldn't be as prevalent, as it's been almost 200 years. They would also see more of a benefit in aiding the Empire. The hostile Dunmer would be a political minority, and slowly, Cyrodiil would be taken back, and subsequently, relieving the Imperial city. It would be easier for the northern hosts as the Aldmeri Dominion are scattered all over the province, and at least half of their front being made up of slaves. The Thalmor eventually retreat to elsewhere. Not long after does the Empire and allies start leveraging elsewhere. Red Guards also start surrounding the region. Being predominantly poor and not fanatical to the Dominion, they tell the Thalmor to pretty much get lost as the majority of Khajiit are not going to help them. The last battle would take place on the border of Elsweyr. With some Khajiit and some Wood Elves, the Thalmor attacked the Empire's blockade. However, being demoralized and out of their element, plus lacking supplies, the Aldmeri Dominion would lose, most likely by being routed. At this time, the Empire and Aldmeri Dominion start talking terms. The White Gold Concordat would of course be much different. First and foremost, there would be no ban on the worship of Talos, but the Blades would likely be disbanded. At this point, the Empire wants to cease bloodshed. Although they have won the war, they don't want to prolong one, as the Argonians still have southern Cyrodiil, as the Empire is ravaged by war. Therefore, the Empire disbands the Blades for a ceasefire. The reason being is the Thalmor wants to destroy any intelligence network, and for the Thalmor to be in debt. Paying for the damage, the Emperor agrees. In the meantime, Morrowind is starting to become a province again, while elsewhere succeeds the Aldmeri Dominion. The Argonians keep southern Cyrodiil for the foreseeable future. Hammerfell, High Rock, and Skyrim still remain loyal to the Empire. But damages must be repaired, and the provinces being taxed the most would be Skyrim and High Rock. The Aldmeri Dominion, on the other hand, go into a Great Depression. And I know what you're thinking. You're asking about the Skyrim Civil War, in which that would still happen. It simply would not be as big. The Thalmor will bide their time and opt to not pay, as why would they even try to pay for something they simply can't? They would still stir trouble in the shadows. They would play Ulfric and the Stormcloaks, as a Morgoth incident still occurs. And the Nords don't like heavy taxes, plus Ulfric has a big ego. The Thalmor may also start trouble with aiding Orsinium, and would make an uneasy alliance with the Argonians, plus they still occupy Valenwood. All this plays into the Second Great War, likely in Elder Scrolls 6. This has been Ryan. Write what you believe in the comments below. Of course, like and subscribe to help out this channel, or become a patron if you want to defeat the Thalmor. I also have exclusive Elder Scrolls inspired art. Thanks for watching everybody, and remember to always love the game.